Imagine a substance that completely destroys cockroaches, bedbugs, ants, and dozens of other resilient pests. It does not rely on toxic chemicals, which means these insects can never mutate or build a biological resistance to it. It wipes them out using a fundamental law of physics, tearing through their evolutionary defenses and ensuring a permanent eradication. Yet this exact same pest destroyer is so exceptionally safe that organic farmers use it on their crops. You can freely sprinkle it around your pets, and you could even accidentally ingest it without suffering a single adverse health effect. And perhaps the most shocking detail of all, a bag of this ancient, resistance-proof powder costs exactly $4. Now ask yourself this: if a perfectly safe, incredibly powerful, and remarkably cheap solution exists, why are we still spraying millions of gallons of failing, toxic chemicals into our living spaces? Why did the pest control technician who charged you $500 last month completely fail to mention its name? The answer has nothing to do with whether this $4 powder actually works. It has everything to do with a multi-billion-dollar industry desperately protecting a highly profitable cycle of temporary chemical fixes. To understand why they are so terrified of this simple dirt, we first need to decode exactly how it weaponizes physics to do what expensive chemicals simply cannot. To understand the absolute power of this $4 powder, we first have to look at an insect's greatest biological weakness. Because insects are incredibly small, their surface area to volume ratio makes them highly susceptible to drying out. To survive in open air, evolution granted them a microscopic shield known as the epicuticular lipid layer. It is a highly specialized waxy coating that covers their entire exoskeleton, acting as a waterproof seal that locks essential moisture inside their bodies. Modern chemical pesticides attempt to seep past this barrier to attack the insect's nervous system. But, as we know, insects simply mutate, passing down genetic traits that neutralize those specific neurotoxins. This is where Diatomaceous Earth, or DE, completely rewrites the rules of engagement. DE is formed from the crushed, fossilized remains of ancient aquatic algae. To a human hand, it feels like soft chalk, but under a microscope, this powder reveals its true nature: a chaotic landscape of porous, jagged shards of amorphous silica. When a cockroach, bedbug, or ant walks across a barely visible dusting of DE, these microscopic shards do two devastating things. First, the sharp edges heavily scratch and tear into that protective waxy armor. Second, and far more lethally, the highly porous silica acts as a microscopic death sponge. It violently absorbs the vital lipids and protective oils right off the insect's shell. Without that waxy seal, the insect completely loses its ability to hold onto its internal water. It begins to evaporate into the surrounding air. The bug is not poisoned. It does not suffer a neurological breakdown. It simply and irreversibly dries out from the inside out until every biological function shuts down. Evolution has no defense against this. A living creature cannot build a genetic immunity to losing its bodily fluids. You cannot mutate to survive total dehydration. It is a flawlessly ruthless and perfectly logical mechanism of nature. Which brings us to an incredibly frustrating realization. If this physical mechanism is so undeniably perfect, why is it completely absent from the expensive pest control contract you just signed? To understand why you have never been offered this solution, you have to look directly at the business model of modern exterminators. The pest control industry does not sell the permanent eradication of bugs. They sell planned obsolescence. When a professional comes to your house and sprays expensive chemical formulas, those neurotoxins are purposefully designed to break down and degrade after 30 to 60 days. Once that invisible chemical barrier evaporates, new bugs will inevitably cross your threshold. And when those bugs return, so does your exterminator, carrying yet another bill for a chemical reapplication. It is an endless, highly profitable subscription loop completely disguised as a household necessity. Now introduce Diatomaceous Earth into that business model. This powder is not a synthetic chemical, it is crushed physical rock. Rocks do not evaporate. Rocks do not expire. If you apply a barely visible layer of this powder inside your wall voids or under your completely dry baseboards, it will continue killing bugs for years. It simply sits there, permanently lethal to any bugs that walk over it, as long as the environment remains dry. For a massive industry built entirely on monthly contracts and recurring revenue, a permanent physical barrier is not a scientific breakthrough. It is an absolute financial disaster handing a customer a $4 bag of powder that permanently solves their problem with bugs is corporate suicide. They are not hiding this ancient dirt because it fails. They are hiding it because it works far too well. However, before you cancel your monthly contract and rush out to buy a bag, you need to pause. While this physical weapon is devastating to bugs, applying it yourself is not a guaranteed miracle if you fall victim to the most common amateur mistakes. When desperate homeowners finally discover diatomaceous earth, they almost always make one catastrophic amateur mistake. They dump thick, heavy piles of the white powder along their walls and doorways, hoping to build an impenetrable fortress to trap the bugs. But bugs are ancient survivors with highly developed senses. When they encounter a massive, obvious mountain of strange powder, they do not climb over it. They simply change their route and walk right around it. The true insider secret to deploying this physical weapon effectively is the art of complete invisibility. You must apply a dusting so incredibly thin that it is barely visible to the human eye. Using a simple squeeze powder duster, you want to puff a microscopic fog of silica that settles gently into the deepest cracks of your baseboards, inside metal cabinet hinges, and deep underneath heavy kitchen appliances. By the time the bugs realize they are walking through a lethal minefield, the microscopic damage is already done. However, there is one absolute practical blind spot to this incredible power. Moisture is the #1 enemy of this ancient dirt. If this powder gets even slightly wet, it instantly turns into harmless mud, completely losing its jagged glass-like edges and its deadly water-absorbing microstructure. It is an invincible assassin against bugs, but only in a bone-dry environment. A damp basement floor or morning dew in the garden will neutralize its power entirely. This dry application method makes it highly effective inside your home. But before you rush out to purchase this powder, there is one critical, life-or-death health boundary regarding its safety that you absolutely must understand. If you walk into a hardware store right now, you will likely see two completely different types of diatomaceous earth. Choosing the wrong one is not just a simple mistake, it is a severe health hazard. You must specifically look for food-grade diatomaceous earth. This version is made of amorphous silica left in its original natural state, making it entirely safe to handle, safe around pets, and even safe to consume. The other type is pool-grade or filter-grade diatomaceous earth. This industrial version has been superheated in a kiln, a process that completely destroys its porous, water-absorbing structure, rendering it utterly useless against bugs. Worse, this extreme heat transforms the powder into crystalline silica, a dangerous substance that can cause severe lung disease if inhaled. Never use pool-grade powder for pest control. Even with the completely safe food-grade version, you must respect one fundamental rule: inhaling large amounts of any fine dust will irritate your respiratory system. Always wear a basic dust mask when applying large quantities, just as you would when sweeping dry dirt. Finally, you must understand the timeline of this physical weapon. While it is ruthless against active bugs, this powder cannot penetrate insect eggs. To truly break the reproductive cycle, you have to leave the dust undisturbed for several weeks, patiently waiting for the next generation of bugs to hatch and take their final walk across the invisible barrier. When applied with patience and precision, this powder forces us to rethink our entire approach to pest control. Which brings us back to the ultimate relationship between humans, insects, and the natural world. For decades, we have been trapped in a toxic chemical arms race inside our own homes. We believe that pouring billions of dollars into complex synthetic poisons would give us the ultimate victory. Instead, we accidentally engineered generations of invincible superbugs. We tried to outsmart biology with chemistry, and we lost. However, when we take a step back, stop relying on expensive chemical contracts, and properly apply one unyielding law of physics provided by Mother Earth, the endless war against these bugs finally ends. You do not need to be held hostage by a recurring monthly bill to protect your family from bugs. You just need the right knowledge and the right ancient dirt. Nature already solved this problem millions of years ago. We just had to remember how to use it. If this video gave you the power to take back control of your home, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We will keep digging up the practical truths that massive industries want to keep buried. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.